Yeah.
Sorry. Yud Gimel Tamuz, Tashin Samech Ches, Samech Vav, page Kuf Ayin Daled.
Alright, so we saw the din of Hashpos Harach to the Talmud is called Hashpos HaSeichel and Hamishim. We saw therefore that remains the Olam with the Talmud. And the reason being that this Nimshach the Mahus Etzem HaSeichel Mia Mashpia Ela Makabel in the form of a Hashpos HaMahus, so therefore it remains with him even Basiluk HaMashpia, even if for some reason the Mashpia stops giving the Hashpah, or he leaves him, he's not there, v'chulu. V'kol mokim sh'amshocha hi ha'ora levad, arei kashem mistalik ha'etzem mizbateles ha'ora ki yodua. And we pointed out at the end of the last class that there was al derech the union of moya and oya. Where the moya is present, so then the oya is ma'ir. Or if for some reason the moya withdraws, or it's not ma'ir, so then there's no ha'ora. Because a ha'ora is dependent be'etzem metziusei in the moya. And if not, then it's misbatel. What misbatel indicates that it loses its whole gather of matziyah. And that whole inyan of chitzenius hamoichin, chitzenius amidas, which was nimshach into the midas to be mo'era the gila hamidas. Hinei masha nimtza me'aseichel b'midas hu achayes b'midah. What does the seichel is here nimtza? Albeit we saw it was nimshach b'tzimtzum of a yerida, but that's the union of inyan of chayin. And so the chayes is found in midah adidei hergesh hab'chayin. And so that indicates that the b'chayin, like we pointed out, is close to being what we call seichel shebamidas. It's already midas seichel, which has gone so down into yerida for the sake of entering the midas, that it's already close to the etzem function of the midas himself. And therefore, the emissar arousal at the middle of the midas is that the midas feel the b'chayin. They become aware, even before they actually go out into gilui, they gain the message that the b'chayin is prompting to them and giving them in order to prompt their coming out into gilui. And so the midas, their inyan is not havon of asoga, but the inyan of the midas is what we call hergesh. It's the inyan of feeling and sensitivity, which is connected with the idea of emotion. They feel the midas sense, but they're feeling the message of the b'chayin, and that enters into the midah, and that's what actually gives the midah the highest to come out in the way that the seichel would determine or want it according to the noisei, the theme or the inyan pnimi of that seichel. For example, if you're misbeinen in dvorim ha'me'erim avo to the Eibishter, so then the midas are required by the seichel to be in a form of av. And that's what we call midas al pi seichel, that the midas are governed and they come out according to the inyan of the seichel. So therefore the type of b'chayin is a b'chayin which really prompts and produces av. And the midas, before they actually are mishkala, they feel, as it were, the message, and they sense it in the form of emotion, the message of the b'chayin, ki korevim ze'el, they're really close one to the other. And therefore the seichel enters the midah through the fact that the midas make a kli, as it were, in themselves to be makabel the b'chayin, and that's the hergesh b'chayin. Well, that's one of the things that we find. There can be a certain melody, Hashem Yishmor, by certain people that they're misbeinain, and they have knowledge of inyonim of Elokus and inyonim pnimiyim, but they don't necessarily feel midas. They remain indifferent, or the expression has it in Yiddish, kalt, legabi inyone Elokus, because they don't feel and they don't sense the message of the B'chein. In other words, that's one of the important inyonim that the midas have to begin their Kabbalah of the message of the Seichel by feeling and being aroused sufficiently to be aware of the direction in their development that the B'chein is giving them. That's but somebody who hasn't worked on himself enough, and maybe his midas are monochim in dvarim study him and dvarim to fail him, then they don't have the sensitivity or the direction in themselves towards Elokus to feel the B'chein, so that even though the Moichin may send down certain messages, then the leiv is not a kli to be makabel the messages. It's one on the famous Indian, the famous melody, which is called Timtum Halei. What the Indian is brought down in Siddhas Barichas, that there's what's called Timtum Halei and Timtum HaMoyach, money in Islam. But Timtum Halei is where the leiv is not a kli. It's not able to feel and to be aware of the message of the B'chein. Therefore, it remains the midas and the emotions remain unstirred, even though the seichel may be functioning, because the midas are not. They don't have a kli kibul, they're not developed. They're not sufficiently freed of all the unique or the chitzonium, as you might call it, in order to feel the message of the B'chein. And that's called Timtum Halei. Timtum HaMoyach is something we won't even go into because it's considered such a serious melody. And that is a dimension not able to feel even any chayas in the seichel of an understanding b'klal. So somebody who's a bit of a bal seichel, then he feels a chayas at least in the seichel and the avana of the Indian, even though he may not get a klal into midas for the reason just mentioned, but at least he has a chayas in the seichel. Or if he doesn't have any chayas in the seichel klal, and he just learns in Yonim and Pnimis HaTorah, they're like yesterday's newspaper, Shem Yerachim, but there's sort of something that doesn't seem to be that new or relevant, and that's called Timtum HaMoyach, and that's a very serious Indian, what the Rebbe Rashab writes in the Sefer Torah Sholem. The Rebbe writes over there that he's choished that there may be quite a few chassidim who suffer from Timtum HaLei. He doesn't want to be choished anybody that they suffer from Timtum HaMoyach, whatever that may mean, whatever that may be maramex. So I see that everybody's very indifferent. I wouldn't suggest they have any Timtum of any sort, but I notice that everybody's very indifferent. So the question is, if you do have Timtum something, then what do you do about it? That should be the question. What's your question, myself?
Is it a problem with the midas that the problem with them, they have to be changed to become a kli that can be kabel, or is it a problem with the seichel that it needs to change itself?
No, that's what we're pointing out. There can be both. It's convey design. And that's what we're just pointing out. When you're talking about Timtum HaMoyach, then you're talking about a moyach that doesn't really give forth any message at all. It just deals with the inyonim b'klirut. Timtum HaLei is where the leiv is not able to feel and sense the message, but that's not because the leiv doesn't have emotions or it's not sensitive to emotions, but its sensitivity has gone out into side things, into what's called in Siddhas zaitik gezach. Therefore, it's not able to feel the leiv is not able to sense the message of the B'chein.
How does it make it complete?
Man?
How does the leiv make it himself complete?
How does
it meet us?
So then that's what's called, you ever heard of iskafia? Other things of that nature. You have to work on yourself, you have to purify yourself, you have to be not shaykhs to all sorts of taivos or ilam, because what causes it, the heart is not able to sense the B'chein, because the midas are, like we pointed out, they're monochim, but dvarim show metzias v'yesus or ilam, but therefore they don't feel the delicacy of a divine message.
If the midas are so involved in the world, so how can you get away without it?
How can you get away without it?
without the Bechem. I mean,
You can't. That's what funny how you don't.
We said that in order to get.
You just have a lot of maybe knowledge and maybe even a bit of his bonniness, but you don't have any midas that come out of it.
And how do you redirect his midas if they're so involved in the world? So how
you deny him and you hammer him a bit. Look at him. That's what we said. It's kafir, noch a little. But I'm always a little bit hesitant to mention too much about these, even these classes, because the next thing is you might have somebody running around getting involved in too much iskafia. But maybe that's not a chashash. I don't know, is it? But anyway, the chashash, the problem is that's the problem. That's the Indian. Therefore, there has to be hergish habechein, harikish nifsach, when nisala matzeichel. We see Begolui that when the seichel goes into helem or it's interrupted altogether, misbatel achai mida. In other words, that if he's not oisik in that is boninus regularly, but after a while he lets it drift away. So in that particular midah that was Messiah, we see it tends to become to use the expression of fashlof and a midah. It's not a midah with all the brand and the chayas that it had, because we're talking about midahs that they wouldn't really be there if not the ashpah of the seichel. That's the emes seen in the midahs alpi avodas Hashem and alpi chesed, alpi moichin. Therefore, that bechein is the chayas inside the midah. It gives the midah the motivation to be a living and enthusiastic and burning type midah of avos Hashem or yiras Hashem or dvarim amishtaifim mehem. But if that seichel withdraws, even the bechein withdraw, because the mensch is not oisik in that inyan anymore. In other words, that it's nifsak or misalim in his mind or in his activities, causing to be misalim for that inyan. Maybe he's looking legamri for another inyan. Then what happens is that particular midah loses the chayas that it had because of the salmus of the bechein of the seichel. Chayas b'midah gam le'achas shemisalem ha'seichel, avu chayas ha'midas loy chayas ha'seichel. The emes is that since the midah was aroused, and there was a certain chayas in the midah, so then the midah can become, as it were, accustomed. It can become what we might call rogil to function that way. And to a certain extent, that is our emes, because just like any inyan what the Eibushter gave us, even the inyan from Eiver Yaguf, if you're not, how do you call them, mistamish in those Eivorim, they tend to wither or to become not functioning. But if you use them and you put down considers that that's a dimion to people who do exercise, not they're trying to work that Eiver that it should be fresh, but if you never do any exercise, you tend to become how do you call it, misnavein, it's called. You become sort of verschlafen, veraltet, how do you call it, old before the time, or whatever like expressions you like to call it. That's because every inyan which has got a certain function needs its function. And if it doesn't, that itself produces a certain levitikite in that particular koyach or inyan which was given by the Eibushter. And therefore, when a mensch uses his midas, alidei what the seichel awoke them, then to a certain extent they have a certain chayas in themselves. Oh, that's their own chayas. It's not the chayas which is being given into them by the seichel. They have a certain innate chayas of their own, and since the bechein touched that off, then that can keep, as it were, for a while at least, it can keep functioning, even though the seichel is misalim. And there's a more deep reason for that, which we're going to see now in a second. then the Chai is given the delicacy and the liberty which comes from the Seichel into the Midah is lost. A certain trace of the Midah's own Chai is having been used, having been Bekolui, can continue. Always in the case of Hashpoyas HaSeichel, Nishara Hashpoya Li'olam. Although we talk about Emes Hashpoyas HaSeichel from a Talmud to a Rav in learning, so then the Hashpoya remains there forever. It's not dependent in other factors. I mean, if he does something Cholila to make himself forget it, then that's another matter. But if he lives even a rogil, a seichel that he got from the Rav will always remain with him in the way he got it. It's not shayat that it would be a misalim or lose its chayas v'chulu. The only thing is, if he doesn't continually remind himself of it, he may not have it in front of him. But once somebody reminds him of the Indian, then it comes back with all of its shleimus. Therefore he says, "Avo bashpoas haseichel, nishara hashpoa li'olam." I know lefisha nimshach v'nishpa mahus ha'oretz haseichel. The etzem mahus of the zach was given over. Mashenki in the case of chitonius haseichel, which goes into the middle, we pointed out that was not mahus hashpoas haseichel. That was only the union from chitonius haseichel, and therefore it didn't give rise mamish to its own mahus in the makabel. It prompted the midas. Therefore, when it withdraws, for whatever reason, then the midas don't have the same klayas that they had when it was in there. Or where you give mahus in haseichel, mahus in haseichel doesn't withdraw. It just stays there under normal circumstances. It stays there le'olam. Omar she'amida atzma nishara. We see that the etzem midah itself always remains by a man, even if it loses that little bit of chayes that it has mitzad its own self. We just described. There's always recognizable in the mensch that midah once it was aroused. So the Rebbe said that's another ma'aser. That's not mitzad the effect of the seichel, but he said vashu nishar ma'amidah atzmo nishara gam le'achar helem ha'seichel. זהו לפי שהעמידה היא מהות טובה בפני עצמו ואין עצם היסבוסו מן השכל כי אם הילודה שלו לבד וכידוע. What the Rebbe points out is that when I get to the Indian, the midas are not dependent in the seichel for their very existence. I think we made this clear when we began the discussion. Over here we see that it reaches the final maskana, that the midas are there in the nefesh mitzad, that everybody has eser koiches, and sheva of those koiches are midas. Every neshama has the tzot the union for midas. The seichel, everybody has seichel. It just depends how he uses it and how he's able to function with his seichel. But mitzad the shleimus nefesh, all the koiches are there. And the relationship of the midas with the seichel, the arousal of the midas, and the seichel, we pointed out that's not even emesa ileva olol. That's just a seder what the Eibushter made it that way. The reasons known la Kodesh Baruch that he wanted that the genuine midas should come through the act of the seichel, but not that the seichel causes midas to be. Midas are there below in the nefesh. All the seichel does is what we call is leido. It's molid the midah. What the moshel from leido means that inside the rechem ha'im is anyway the embryo, the valad is anyway inside the mother. Leido means that he just comes out. Yeah, the vlad is noilad. Mia helena ela gilui. The vlad is already there. Belav. Okay, that's the word leido. It's not shy to talk about later unless you got something which is already there, bifnim, in the rechem. The same meaning, the midas are always there by a mensch. You always got avio. It's just that they're not begolui and they haven't come out the way it should be in Avodas Hashem. They don't come out in a way that they're active midas in Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem actively by the man. The Indian from the Chitzonius HaSeichel, Hashem gave that a gift that it's able to wake them up and bring them out liday gilui. And therefore, this is only the second time that he's hinted to be the sin. Because in the first bracket he said that once the seichel is misalim, that doesn't mean that the midah just completely disappears. He said there still continues a certain chayas in the midah, because it was anyway functioning, so it has a certain chayas of it. And now he points out even more deeply in the second bracket, the reason why that is, BMS, because the midas anyway have their own matzias, kutzvan in seichel. All the seichel does is molid esamidas, brings them into birth, as it were, from the matzias that they already have. Of it doesn't cause the very etzem of the midah. So therefore, even though the seichel's gone, you can still notice that the midah may there. What is gone? Alidei the helam of the seichel is the chayis. In other words, that the midas give a certain chayis into the. I'm sorry, the seichel gives a certain chayis into the midah. So I mean, we see papoyo. What sort of chayis is that? I mean, so what is the nafkamina between the chayis of the midah mitzad atzmei and the chayis alidei the seichel of his bonanas amitias, like we saw here? The nafkamina is clear. That the whole union for midas, just in their own right, even midas of kedusha, is that they tend to be more lead for the sake of the adam. He'll say, "Oh yes, Elikus is loy toiv. It's good for him." In other words, he feels that Av is great because the Eibush will look after him and give him, and then he'll love the Eibush because he gives him. In other words, that the midas beteva see things through their spectacles of yeshus and their own interests, as you might say. Even mitzadinina akadusha. The Indian from seichel, as we see, seichel is the Indian of understanding, and bittul el ha'emes. That's what seichel is. So we saw in Gadlus Amidas, the emes just takes over the midas altogether. We saw yesterday Barichas in the Shir, which was B'Yud Beis Tamuz. Now it's Yud Gimel Tamuz. Well, at least it's Moitzi Yud Gimel. And if we see that the Indian Amidas, they tend to be the, what you might call the Emshech, the Yeshus Adam. I feel the Midas the Kedusha. The meaning of the Seichel comes down and arouses the middle, giving them a direction and a chayas which is not there purely mitzad atzmon. Dahainu, that they're going to go after Elikus, ki Elikus is toiv be'etzem. Not just toiv for you, but it's toiv be'emes, and therefore it'll also be toiv for you. It's kedai, and it's nochein of kedai raui to be bottled to Elikus in a form of ava and chukah. After the geshes will be to feel the chukah, to, as it were, long for and run after in your Elikus. But this is a in from Kavona Midas, and does it the Tayu Amiti, albeit ultimately Gambishville Adamat. But that delicacy of direction and understanding of what is the immediate function of the Av or the year, that's the Chayas that he talks about here. That's what the Rebbe talks about, Chayas in the Midah, that the Midah lives with a direction and a Kavona and a beetle, as you might call it, to Elikus. That's chayes. That type of beetle is chayes. So that withdraws if the seichel withdraws. But it's a fact that the midah came out, that can hold itself without its own koch, which is its own matzias. What is it? The matzias of the midah. It's in the second bracket of the answer, Vikon design. Look at a thing which came without another thing. If the other thing's not there, then it's not there, the cloud. Does it? That's kill the diuk that he answered. In the second bracket, he points out that Ein Zeh Kushia Klal, could the midas have their own entity. They're a separate entity altogether in the nefesh, apart from the seichel. Function of seichel is only to be to bring them into galui. Come over in many places in Chassidus. Ukiyadu, and that's where he writes in the Eden Ukiyadu. Sure. And remember, we've seen numerous points. Now we sum it up. Nimto, the hashpoas haseichel. When we talk about the Rav giving over ainim from seichel, usha nimshach mahus haoretz haseichel. That the albeit seichel beklagen ze haoret, but the very mahus of that Indian is nimshach into the makabel. V'lochein hamashpia. Now we go on with a new inyan. Since he gives over the mahus of a inyan, how it is by him.
Why does it keep? The second time it says that the mahus of the ha'ara is a seichel. Why does it use the term?
Huh?
Why does it say that it's the ha'ara is a seichel?
Well, we've already been to that Arichas Kedova in the previous. We pointed out that whatever you give over to a second part, whatever you give out from the seichel is only a ha'ara from the seichel. The etzem seichel from which he's not able to mamish give out from himself. And then we pointed out that there's another inyan. That the very inyan of seichel is a form of a ha'ara. Because there's another type of ashpah goes through the moyach, which is ashpah atzmis, that we spoke about later. For example, you give birth to another entity. Well, but the whole inyan of seichel is a ha'ara. So if it's only a ha'ara, then how can you give mahus? So he said, no, the mahus of the ha'ara you can give. Nimtzul, if he said, that when you're giving over seichel, you're giving over a mahus of the, albeit ha'ara, but it's the etzem mahus of that inyan. Now we move from that to a new point. It's a new now, what you might call maskona that comes out of that. V'lochein hamashpia nitfas umislabish be'ashpor. And therefore he said, since the giving over to the Talmud and to the Makabo is an inyan of mahus, he's giving over the seichel be'etzem inyonik Moshe who into the and to remain permanently in the Makabo. Therefore he is literally grasped, and he also has to put himself into that by way of his slapshas. He has to enter, as it were, into that in a way that it is malbishim, meaning that it chaps him, and it's another way of saying the word nitfas, that you become involved to the point that you are governed somewhat by that whole inyan which you've undertaken to give over the ashpah, aren't you? Hello? Aren't you?
Yeah.
Huh?
Writing down what you're saying.
So, may I ask what's the activity of that pen?
I'm writing down what you're saying.
Oh, very good. Okay, if that's the case, then we couldn't be more accepting of the movement of the pen. Well, Achain said the Rebbe, the mashpia is nitfas, and he's mislabish. He enters like almost a levush which covers him, or I mean, whatever you say about a levush doesn't just cover you, but it governs you in a certain way. It puts you into a certain form. Sheharei lo yushpa haseichel mi atzmei ki im tzorich lahashpia es haseichel. He said the inyan of the seichel, if it's going over the mahus adova, that's not going to happen just on it. It won't happen me atzmei ki im tzorich ashpia es haseichel. He has to give it forth deliberately and actively to make it go over to the makabel. In other words, the way you give something which is only a luminescence of yourself, then you don't have to be busy with it, and it's not really in any way masik you in any real way. The famous muscle of the shemesh, the shemesh is not misasik to give off the oil, and it's not nitfasik giving off the oil. But where you take something which is mamish amahus dova, which is almost, as you might say, part of your own self, even though it's only a ha'ara of the self, and you put that over into another entity, then you've got to be busy with it. It's not going to happen, man. In other words, what you might call it, pieces of their own entity don't just go over into another entity. You've got to literally, to use the expression, tear them off yourself and put them over into the other person. And if you don't, they don't go. Things like that don't just happen, me, Achman Baklau. And therefore, since in order to make it go, there has to be a deliberate act on the part of the mashpia, well, that's why he becomes nitfasume mislavi. He becomes grasped, and the inyan, to a certain extent, puts itself around him and governs him. And one of the inyonim that requires, or one of the inyonim causes and brings to is u'bi'esh ha'ashpah אי-אפשר לו להשכיל שכל אחר. That the simple nafkamina of that is that when he's busy with that islapshus and with that deliberate act of making the thing go out from himself and enter the other person, then he's not able to be oisik in the seichel for himself. In other words, he can't be maskil in himself another seichel. When you're busy giving over seichel to somebody else, you can't be thinking about something else for yourself at the same time. Except it brought down. There were certain gewaldige, unbelievable moiches that they were able to do. It was brought down as a tremendously rare. They should be able to be mashpia a seichel at the same time. Yeah, think about a seichel and be misbeiden in a seichel liatzmo. It's brought down as kimata dova bilti efshari. That appears that maybe there were certain people that were able to do it, but they were b'derech ha'yotzim min ha'klal. Al derech harogil, you can't be maskil yourself a seichel acher if you're being mashpia a seichel to ama kabel umikol shechein, and how much more so kal v'choima she'i efshor lashpia seichel acher. You can't possibly be mashpia another seichel. In other words, you can't have two mekablim on two different themes going at the same time. Yeah, you can't be mashpia to this mekabel. Yeah, at the same time you're being mashpia to another seichel, to another mekabel, to skate net. That's a person. That's taka EFSHA. And Mamela, that's an indication that b'shas the actual hashpah, you are nitfas nimtzo b'toich levush. So that Indian is malbisha and brings you into a certain obligatory identification only with them Indian. That means that to a certain extent the busyness of hashpah is a committed business. The b'shas, the mashpia, gets it, he commits himself. The be'oisir hazmanim, he can't be maskele, le'achman, he can't be mashpia and androseh, he must be busy only b'dova zeh and b'kivun zeh to the mekabel. Well, if he said, it follows that we have to say that he is nitfas, v'zeu shenitfas u'mislabish. Well, those are the two inyanim. Nitfas means that you're caught, literally, to a certain extent, almost, to use the expression, being held by the yinid. You're how do you call it? Almost, to use an expression, incarcerated by the yinid. You're trapped by it. And then there's an in that you enter it so much that it covers you like a lavush, and just like a lavush doesn't really alter you, and it doesn't. Well, on the other hand, it causes you to be miskale only in a certain oifan. Yeah, and that's the Indian of mislabish bozeh.
If it's so that when the when it leaves, the aura also leaves, and like that's kind of what it's saying. So how is it that when you daven b'kavana, it lasts like throughout your day, or when you daven when they davened on Shabbos by great cry, how could it last through the week? How does it last in the midas?
Well, you see, that's there's a inyan. We're going to see about that. The truth of the matter is, it's going to come up, not the davening on Shabbos, but it's going to come up by inyan doimel there, and that is that the inyan for hashpah is also shaykh within yourself, and you can and you have to be mashpia also to yourself. And the inyan of avodas hatfilah, if it's proper, that's taking you taking inyanim inside yourself and putting them into another part of yourself. And that's a form, that's a form of mashpia. And therefore you have to be, first of all, in order to be a mashpia to other people, you have to first of all be a mashpia to your own self. Okay, you do gam came bedrush chassidut. And therefore what happens over there is that where he's put certain inyanim from his moach into his regesh and into his midas and even amiti, and if he particularly is taken it in a way that it's lasting, more like the from pneumis amidas, then that can last for a long. It can last for a long time. And even if it was only chitzonius dikla fiyerach, nonetheless we see that it does remain a little bit as long as he reminds himself of it the whole time. As long as he keeps going back and, as it were, introducing the union of the seichel.
So that's more of a hashpah than an or.
It is, yeah. It's
Okay.
more hashpah than yeah. But it's like the hashpah that we saw here, the hashpah chitzonias of the seichel, but it can have a certain border on a more pneumistic and bordering on any from pneumis.
Is there a point where you said that where you can say that the emotion has been given birth to? Is it just?
Yeah, well, you see, that's what we described at great length. That the midas are there, mitzad the shleimus of the nefesh, but they're not begalui. The nefesh has the midas, but they're not there begalui. The seichel, the Eibishter made it that the seichel can arouse the midah and give it like a good guidance and a good reason and motivation to reveal itself. And that's called the b'chai. That's what we went into it great length. Yeah.
You just said before about a rabbi not being able to be makabel on two different, spit on two different makabels at the same time.
He's not able to be makabel from a different makabel.
He's not being able to.
No, not that he's not able to be makabel from a different makabel. He can't be mashpia to another makabel. If he's being busy with this makabel, he can't be mashpia to a tweiter makabel. I see you got to cash out. I talked to several people in the class. That's not a problem. It's all one makabel. It's a shia. So a shia, it's aimed at everybody. So everybody is like kulam keish echad b'leiv echad. And therefore, it's like talking to, as it were, one person. That's why you can't have an ashia, somebody that is not really so shy to the shia, because then you're trying to talk to the people who are shy, and you're trying to talk to them at the same time, and that's almost an impossibility. All right, so now we go further. There's a new Indian now which comes up, and that is v'gam oisa boy shinoi veis yispilers. Not only does he become nitfas, he becomes held, as it were, and almost incarcerated in the matter that he has to be only in that, and it guides him with a revush type direction. A new Indian is, another thing that happens, it causes in him changes. He undergoes alterations within himself and a form of his pilus. His pilus means that he becomes affected through what you might call the interreaction with it. There's like a whole interaction between him and the Makabel, Alitei ad Ashpah. That is a new concept, and that is the mensch, by giving over to the Makaboim, he, as it were, changes. Just the etzem fact that he gives over, well, that causes in him what you might call shinuyim l'malyusa, which have advantages almost. In other words, that he doesn't just lose his time, because the Hagdorah, the definition that we just made, a mensch container, what does he need to hold even not for? He's just a losing. He's like, as you might call, on the losing end. He's not able to think another cycle. He can't even talk to anybody else. He can only be busy in that matter. So he can tell that he's a loser. He's a mafsid in Yashpah. And what we're now going to show is that he's not a mafsid at all. On the contrary, the etzem hashpah causes in him shinuim and interreaction, almost what you might call almost like emotional reaction, what they bring milas into his whole being, that had he not done it, he wouldn't have had those inyonim. What that means is that he's changed altogether, like Abivadi. She'alidei hashpah mitoisef seichel eitama hamashpia, is a kedavki through the going down to give over to the Makabel, or things become added into him, mitoisev, if in the word lahosiv. Things become added and what you might call milas occur within him. Ukemaima, which a Gemara Masechta Tainis, and Daf Zayin, the Gemara says over there that Rabbi Chanina said that Harbi Mati Mi Rabboisa, I learned very much from my rabbis, my teachers. Yeah, v'yoysa mi, how do you call it? Umi chaver yoysa mi. From my chaverim that we used to talk about, be mefalpo together in the base medrash, I learned even more than I learned from my Rabbi Isai. Avo mitalmido yosami kulam. He said, but I learned from my Talmidim more than all of them. Everything I learned from the Rabbein plus everything I learned from the Chaverim, I learned from the Talmidim. So come to Islam, he said that the meaning of the Hashpah, well, that causes a addition and an aliyah inside the Mashpiyah that's even more than what he got from his Rav. I feel more what he was makabel from the Rav. When he takes the inyan that he learned from the Rav and he begins to give it over to a makabel, then things occur in him which are additions even more than when he learned at Malachatchila, and that is a Chiddush Gadol. So the Rebbe said, Levad zois, apart from the fact sheyesh Talmid machim es Rabbi alidei akushiyas. He said that's apart from the fact that there's such a inyan called Talmid machim es Rabbi, that there's a Talmud that he makes wise his Rav. He causes Chochmah in his Rav. Machim, from the word Chochem. Yeah? Hachim is a causative verb. You make him a Chochem more. Yeah, Talmid machim es Rabbi. I don't know if you guys remember what you learned, but Dafke, in this particular, it's interesting, in this week's Pirkei Avos, we're going to learn this Shabbos, in Perek Vav, even though it's not really Pirkei Avos, that's really a Brisa. It's not really the Mishnayos. It's a Brisa, Perek Shishi, but it's called Perek Shishi Efanovitz, even though it's not Mamish the Lashon of the Mishnah. It's the Mishnah. I mean, it's wrong to call it the Mishnah of Perkei Avos, that there are 48 things. What Ali Day said, the Adam is Nikna Hatoira Be Arbaim Ushmeina Devarim. Are you familiar with them? I couldn't say familiar with all 48 of them, but he mentions over the 48 things, and the 46th one, Mamish right at the end, just before he gets to the end, then he says Hamakim es Rabbi. So the very fascinating thing from that is that we're talking over there about the milah that the Talmud gets from having all these 48 different approaches to his learning. So we see that he, by being machim es Rabbi, he also gains from that. Yeah, apart from the fact that the Talmud, therefore, that's not maybe a good example of the emes and content of machim es Rabbi, because that's talking more about the makabel being alidei what he's machim es Rabbi, then he gains from it as well. And therefore, we have to come on to another Maimah Chazal, the Gemara in the sector Chagiga, in Daf Yud Daled, Amud Daled, just before the Gemara we were talking about yesterday. Mamish just on the other Amud. Over there, the Gemara talks about a Talmud Machim es Rabbi, and there the Hadgosha is more on the milah for the Rab. If he has a Talmud that is Machim es Rabbi, that's a good thing. So they will tell you for the Rab also. Because Alidei, what he asked him, Kashi is, and he tumult, and to use the expression, Hamativ to the Rav, he tires out the Rav with these Kashi is, and Alidei Zeh, the Rav is Misala in his understanding, not only of that Indian which he's giving over, but also other Indian, because he gets a new gather in Chokhmah from all the Kashi is of the Talmud, and that's the inyan for a machim es Rabbi. So therefore, it's understandable. Favu is the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos over there, that's one of the Arbaim Ushmeina Dvarim, that the makabel is also koyna Torah alidei zeh, because if he's machim es Rabbi with the right type of shaylas, so then the Rav becomes higher. So then the Rav gives him over as al chinyanim which he mightn't have been zeicher to get had he not made the Yisrael to ask the questions and to be noisav and noisan matonish or Torah with a Rav. Ramil is verstandlich that the Iker Raya Linians what we're talking about is not from Pirkei Avos. The Iker Raya is from the Gemara of a so it's understandable what is the Kavanah in Pirkei Avos.
Would I be right to say that there's certain Mechakim that the teacher can only get through being a mashpia, like that he cannot get by himself?
Yep. That's exactly what he said. That was even with the previous statement. It's a Talmidei Yosemi Kulam, that only through that I was able to reach those particular madrigas. So therefore the Rebbe said he's not talking here so much about, in this particular sentence, in this particular in, he's not talking so much about the Machim es Rabbi. He said Levadim Zoy, even apart from that. Sheyesh Talmud, the Machim es Rabbi, Alidei Akushis, Ukahai Gavna, Hine Alidei Etzem HaSpoel Talmido, Mitoyisef Seichel Eitzer HaMashpir Keyeh. In other words, the Rebbe says, even without the Talmud Machim es Rabbi. Talmud Machim es Rabbi is another profit that can be from the whole union of the Ashpor. And that's like what you might call an extra profit. There's a Talmud Machim es Rabbi. Knowing what could be better. But the Rebbe said the etzem union that is oisik in Ashpor to the Talmidim, that itself causes in him העניין of a תוספת, מתוסף עצר המשפיע כידוע. So what should you do is, why should that be? למה יהיה דבר כזה? That's well known that the Alter Rebbe's got a very famous mind. Why do I call it a famous mind? Because it does happen to be quite well known. In the Siddur from the Alter Rebbe, after the whole tefillah, he's got there, how do you call it, called a Sharat Talmud Torah. After you finish down, you're supposed to learn. So you guys say just do it automatically. What you do is you pack in a bit of breakfast and you just go back and learn. Kol hayom kulei b'li hefsek, isn't it? Edifah. You're supposed to learn after the union of Tefillah. Immediately after Aleinu, there's a drush, a whole drush called Shar Talmud Torah. That's called like a hezbollah, what happens after you daven b'chulu. So the Alter Rebbe is masber over there that the Eibishter made in such a way a certain inyan, which we'll soon see what it is, that a Rav should Aleph be able, and Beis he should want to be mashpir le Talmidim, to Talmidim b'klal, or to other people b'klal, because he says that the difference between a Rav Amiti and Mekablim is ein areh. And I say it's brought in Siddur B'Roiv HaMakoymes that a emes a Rav legabi Talmidim the saying which ein behem era. And remember, a Rav Amiti, what is a emes a oisik and all these muskalas and all these inyanim, why should he want B'klal to busy himself with this whole inyan from an Ashpor? The Alter Rebbe says there, and a Chanami he wouldn't. And there's even certain Ravs that they make that slight blunder in their life. I said, what about Mali Lakolina? I said, it's just better, bottom in this, let me alone, there'll be a Porush. Like the famous Prussian that the word is Man and Baal Shem Tov v'chulu. And if I says the Alter Rebbe, how is it that a Rav is mashpir? Wie kommt das B'klal? That he should be nimshach into the inyan von Ashpoya. It's hyper l'chayra l'matzias. He's paying a right to the Mekablim. This is for him a kofedik that's not really going to lead him anywhere. So there was the Alter Rebbe that there's a klal. Have you ever heard it? No, it's tchilas and b'seifa. A very amazing thing. The Alter Rebbe says that Gabi, that the emes Rav, the Talmidim, I say be safe. They said the end of the road, as you might say, the way down someplace. Not over Alidei, what he gives himself up with the Sefer. Then there's a whole what the Eibishter made, that in the Sof is Davke Nimta as a koyach, which goes back, beli seichel for what is it? It's called notes. It's like something that's found there, but they're jammed. It's jammed in. Vein v'zeh hez, but alpi seichel. The Davke, when he gives himself up with the lowest point in the mind of the Talmud, then there's this tremendous chozer, this how do you call it, returning light goes back, and that hits into tchilas on. What tchilas on means, even l'mayla with the seichel, how it was when he began with it. Like we saw at the beginning of the Hemshah. I don't know if anybody here was over here when we were at the beginning of the Hemshah, or the first Maimon, the Rebbe Taisa over there. No, it's Seifon, but Tchilas on. In a pshat, the Tchila means even higher than the the Mokke of the Mashpia, even higher than the level in Al-Kus, what the whole thing be? Yeah, that's what he teaches over there. And the Miller, that's why it's a very famous drush, or that drush is a very famous cloud. What the Alter Rebbe said over there, that's the cloud of the Sefer Yetzirah. So it's a statement. And the Sefer Yetzirah, no, it's Tchilos on, be safe on. Davki in the laws madrega, when the mashpia goes down into a madrega she'ein aroichelov, and he's busy there to give him the emes, how we understand it, then there's an oil choizer which goes back into tchilason, and he gets a much greater and deeper inyan than he had melachatchila, afilu with all the kishreinas and all the greatness that the Rav has mitzad his own ability. And the Chaz of the Alter Rebbe to Pele de Chizah. And that's why it is that there's Ashpah in the world. If it weren't for that, there wouldn't be Ashpah. Nobody would want to be a Mashpia, kind of it. Nobody would want to take on a Zamin job, to be a Mashpia. Davki the Eivshter made it that in the Sof, in the Talmud of Poshet, Davki there, he's Mekabel, a Zamin Inyan, and that's the Rekuda, what the Rebbe says here, that in every Shefa, and every ashpah, where it's done in a proper way and in a genuine way, where the mapir gives himself over to the sof of the Talmud, then he gets in it as al-chinyanim, which he would never have had mitzad atzmai, and that's a ha'inyan which doesn't make sense. Ein bezeh inyan al piseichel. That's not an inyan, not mitzad the seichel of the Rav, not mitzad the seichel of the Talmud. No, the Eivshter made it as a way that if there'll be ashpah, that's not even schava. The reward, it's not even that, it's a matzias that the Eivshter made, that nauts, that hammered into the madrega tatina of the makabel. There's a power to be b'derech choizer ma'ira a gewaldige mocker of new inyanim in the mashpia. This is in the Lashon of the Sefer Yetzirah, nauts chilosim b'seif. That's a famous mimer in the Shara Talmud Torah from the Alter Rebbe, or it's actually from the Middle Rebbe, but it's he order from the Alter Rebbe, that is Megala, the whole sword of Ashpah. So the Rebbe said it follows the Fizeh, every Ashpah is a emes shinui mitzad that cloud. When he just becomes involved in the union of Ashpah, then automatically it causes in him a Ailui, Ainif Teisef. So therefore it follows Im Kain that Kemoi Kain Fa'eifach Chasva Sholim, or Kemoi Kain Yesh Loima, says the Rebbe, we can suggest that if that's the way in the positive, how do you call it, in the Chiyu, then we have to understand in the negative, Kemoi Kain Yesh Loima Shalidei Ha'der Ashpah. If a mensch doesn't give when he could, but he doesn't give, nase giroin eitela amashpia, then it causes a inyan for subtraction and lack by the mashpia. So come to us at the two ways, two extremities. Either he gives here the ashpah mitamida yoyse mikula, more than the inyan for natalmid machim misrabah. In the etzeminion of giving, he's going to have a tremendous ilui, a tremendous advantage, a new in. If he doesn't, then Rachman in the Tzlan, Afu, L'tayin Evak, Misa. So comes again, that's the shot that one of you raised before. What about somebody that no, maybe he was the one who raised it. There's the inner of the Ashpah, the Adam Mitoich Atzmai. In other words, what the Rebbe says here is that Maaseh Giroin, Eitzel Mashpia, and the Rebbe must be in Ayin Beis, in the Hemshech Ayin Beis, and also much later in the year Ayin Tes, other places where the Rebbe talks about this Inyan. And it must be that it doesn't necessarily mean that if he doesn't be oiset with Talmidim, I mean, not everybody's mamish has Talmidim around that he's going to be oiset with them. Then the Kumtoislef, he said that every Chacham that doesn't have Talmidim, he's just going to be a Baal Giron. He's going to get worse than what he was when he was learning. He's going to lack, he's going to miss out. And if I was up to Rebbe Rashab becoming Mekaimis, this is the Nikud which came up before in the discussion, I don't remember quite how we got onto it, but there's a inyan of them being mashpia mashpia b'toich atzmei. There's an inu, what is mashpia tzaziyah. What we mean to say is that the beheda ha'ashpoa, there can be a giroin etzel mashpia. We mean what he just sits completely on his merits, and he's not even mashpia li atzmei. So therefore we see there's a very fascinating concept that you can and you should be mashpia le'atzmecha. And that's what we pointed out before when we spoke to that there's what a mensch can take in on him, and he can translate them from his higher aspect into his lower aspect, into his midas, or even into his chusha. But on him that he's very anxious within himself, at least to be a dogma higher to himself, at least that he should. Yeah, the Rebbe once spoke. Yeah, but if I bring it, that you're not allowed to be a yesh, or at least you should be able to look at yourself and have a bit of nachas ruach and zichalein. You should be able to say, well, at least I'm not cholilah going down in the form of a giro, and at least I'm holding my ground with chalapochas. And how is that? Ali day what the mensch is a mashpia b'teich atzmi. That's b'tuk the nakuda. That's what the Rebbe says in Ayin Beis. That then he at least saves the situation, and he doesn't have a giruin, but he doesn't necessarily have the tremendous toisefes which comes from the Talmidim. The chiddush here is that Ali day Talmidim he gets a tremendous toisefes, not chilason b'seifan, or not chilason b'seifan. Amamir lefiseh. The giroin is only beheder ashpa legamrei. Aina afilu legabi atzmei. Where he just sits on his merit. Like we said before, some people can't be bothered with all even working with themselves. They just understand, he's a bal of ideas, and he's a bal of ideas, and he can learn, but he doesn't busy himself with the etzem inyan of being mashpia afilu b'teich atzmei, and that's not an easy task. To be a mashpia to zichalein is in some ways even more delicate than being a mashpia le'acherim. But then, if you're not a mashpia to zichalein, then you're not really being mashpia le'acherim b'oten hadorush. That's what the Rebbe means here by nase giroin etzelama mashpia. And if you look carefully in the words, the Rebbe is hinting here a very profound inyan, and that's what that Maimon from the Shara Talmud Torah is very famous, because the Rebbe says that the whole secret. So it comes to us that this is not just a inyan sichli. Oh yes, if you give seichel to somebody else, you get back. Oh no, it doesn't. It's not like that. No, it's a gezeira. What the Alter Rebbe used of the Mefurish, the expression shein hitpia hakodesh baruch hu b'seder, that the Eivshter planted it in the seder inyonim. That actually you read it to the Talmud. Aposhiv, the Talmud Tacht, and Davke, he said there's this tremendous arousal in the mashpia from a madrega where he never would have reached it mitadat. That's not chilosem b'seifan. And Melanimsa, that's a min gezeira, what the Eivshter made, that there should be ashpa. Otherwise, there wouldn't have really been the mitis ashpa. So we see then that in Cain, if somebody's a mashpia, he gains from knowing. Remember, there's a shinui v'his pilas from the etzem mashpoya. Now, further in it, v'gam, another reason why he alters and he changes, and this is what you might call the price that you have to pay. This is the emes. Once you give the ashpoya, you get this mital midayizme kulam b'derech not chilos b'seif. What is the price? Gam tzodik liyos b'ashpach ki lo yos yoyatzeitz eich lahashpia ba'oifan sheyiskabel eitzalama. Very nice, you're going to be a mashpia. Oh, so I'm going to give all, I'm going to talk. Great, but you got all these Talmidim. How are they going to be makabel from you? How are you actually going to get it across to them? Well, then you have to be, as a word, misyayetz. You have to take etza within yourself in order to work out how you're going to give it over. But even a key tov that the makablim will be able to learn from, and that's a very special chush, a very special gift. All of it, and that's what the Gemara calls kiloyes yoyatzeis. That literally the kidneys get together and they form a eitzah, how they call it, they discuss things and they prompt the management eitzah. What to do? And the Gemara says it right near the end of Masechet Brachos, Samech Vav, right there near the end. And the Gemara says an amazing thing. And the Gemara says that the kloyes, because there's two of them, then they interact, they sort of discuss things, and they prompt you with different ideas. Now the fascinating thing is that it's the kloyes that present you with these ideas. And so the Gemara brings over there that the kloyes are yoyates, and then the Gemara brings a whole brisa, and it says that the kloyes are yoyates. And then something about it that the pair, then halev mavin. Now that's also a lesson from there's also the Sefer Mashu made. We say that in the Pasuk Aliyah, it's bina libo v'halev mavin. Every Friday you say it. So the Gemara says that alidei the kloyes halev mavin. V'az hapeh machate. The pair cuts the words for what to say, and then something else, a whole series of things that happen. Well, it all begins from the kloyes yoyates, and then we see that after the kloyes yoyates alev mavin. So from that we see that the higher inyanim, to a certain extent, are makabel from the lower inyanim. That the kidneys are much lower than the heart, but the heart only understands and, as it were, sorts out the message which is given to it by the kloyes. That means that the ikar are the kloyes, and therefore the Gemara says that you got two of them. It says that one of them tends to produce you with not such good inyanim, and the other one is always very genuine, always in the right path. And it says, how do we know which one is which? So the Gemara says, there's a pasuk in Mishlei, leiv chochem el yaminoi, that the heart of a chochem is on his right side. So it's one of the kashi that everybody's heart's on their left side. Well, it takes the heart of a chochem on the right side. You know that a chochem is always made to the right. He doesn't go into the left. So the left kidney, you should be a bit careful of him. But the right kidney, but he gives the right spur, doesn't he? Huh? Yes, he does. Yeah, the right kidney gives the right type of hashpur. That really you are gaining from the kidney more than you are from the heart. The heart only sorts out and tries to understand the message that's given to it by the kloyes. It comes again to Mashal over there, and the Mashal says in Brachos, the Mashal says and the Mashal says that normally in a mensch there's only one of every type of organ, except for the eyes. You have 2 eyes and 2 ears. He said in the inside organs, you're supposed to. You have two lungs. So he said, wherever you got two, then they sort of interact and they produce different. The same with it's put down in Sforim. The same again to the lungs. That they sort of interact and they produce this whole thing that comes out in what we call cold. The voice and everything. Whole big arichas says about that. So the Mashal says wherever you have two organs where you could have go away with one, but the Indian is that those two organs have to interact in a way that they produce a message. Because when two get together, then you get more messages. Things work and become more in a way of prompting the Adam within Yonim. So therefore that's the union of the two. The Mashal says an amazing thing. And he said that's the pshat when we say after Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, that you have to live there with both hearts. He says no such thing as both hearts. You only got one heart. So the Alter Rebbe is in Tanya, but he got two sides to the heart. You got the left ventricle and the right ventricle. That's key to the two hearts. Of the Mashal says you only got one heart. So he said that's what the pasuk says. We after Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha. It really means the two kloyes. that you've got to work on yourself so hard that the left close the legs on the right thing. That the discussion between them shouldn't be a shlogerai, between the Toiv and the Lohu Kach Toiv, but they should both be discussing via Zay to give a go, gehoiven a Eitzah, Kurei Toiv, and das ist Pshat b'chol b'avcha, as they state in the Marshal. But in the Gemara, the eyes John learns stores that he learns that the Pshat b'chol b'avcha is really b'shnei kloi etzecha. The Gemara says b'shnei yitzorecha, is the Gemara. So he says that the emes Eitzah is the kloi. Pitiful. Now, I'm time good. If he said what we mentioned too anyway, and kind of mucking is really getting late, what they're going to do is, but it's important that you understand the background of these inyanim, because once you get that background, then you understand what the Rebbe is saying much more in a way of reality. That comes out if he said that the kloyes, therefore if you look in Tanya, I mean you're all familiar with the Geras HaKodesh, in chapter 15 over there, in Geras HaKodesh, the Alter Rebbe talks bariches about the effect of the two kloyes, the kloyes yoyatos, that they get together to produce a profound message to the heart. The Alter Rebbe talks about it at some length over there, and if you look there carefully, you'll see that it's a very important etzem dikashwa that comes from the kloyes, dafke, because there's two of them, and he said they're beged and neitach v'huid. They're like the Indian of neitach v'huid, and he said they're like two millstones that sort of function together to grind the and then it comes out al tadayeza tev, and it's able to be absorbed in the body of the adam v'yeza tev v'tagom tzarichet. The same kind of machid, there's certain pratim that he goes into over there. It's not really a place to go into this cloud. Everything is really dependent in the kloyes, and therefore when a person has to really decide how's he going to give over ashpoyer, then that's called what he called the kloyes yoyates. That's the old Indian that he had to go to. In Yiddish they say that he gets clicked him into kishkes. It gets him right into the tummy, right down in the lower parts of the body. He's busy with trying to how are you going to do this. So it says the Rebbe, Ein Nechanami. The Gemara is up before he said this, Ein Nechanami. It's right down in your carrot, I call it in your pupi, or lamatam, he said, the kloya. They're the ones that are prompting you. And therefore, what do you need to have our Eitzah? What are the types of kloya? It's your taste. What do they need to give you Eitzah? Because it's a tremendous Indian, as we said before. The Rav is Ein B'Koichel. How does he do it? Yeah, he gets an Eitzah from the kloyes, and he said the more you're able to draw on that Eitzah, the more you're able to get it across to the Talmud in a better way. And that's another Indian now, that the ashpah is going to go in a way that it will clap to you. You decide you want to be a mashpia, you want Talmud Yosef Mekulam, you want all the good Zachen from being a mashpia. How's it going to get over to the Talmud if you ain't a reichelov? Therefore you got to deal, you got to pay the price, you got to matter yourself to work out how are you going to give it over. And as I even that it'll go over to you and it'll be miskabel Talmud. For that you have to get your own kishkis functioning. And you go to your kloyes that you're active, and they have to feed, and they prompt the heart, and the heart prompts the mouth. They taught in the Gemara. Say in the Gemara and say the Alter Rebbe over there in Tanya. And if he's ekum, he said the Rebbe that you pay a price, that you have to be in a even a kloyes yetzer ekel ashpia, but even she's kabel etela. I'm a kabel. And he said, U'kamoy sheyesh malamed hu baal poyel. There's a famous lesson when you talk about malamdim in chadorim, if he's a good malamed or not a good malamed, then you use the expression he's a baal poyel. What does a baal poyel mean? That he's very good at getting the material over to the kablim, that when you faher the kinder, they know what they're talking about, they know what the Laman's taught them. Because he taught them in such a way that it's mishkabel by it goes into their minds, and it unites with them, because he used these kloyes, and he went through this whole union of kloyes, yoetes, and he becomes what's called a baal, a poyel. A talmid mislamed alidei ashposei. He said the Talmud mamish mislameid. He learns within himself. He becomes a learned boy alidei the ashpor from such a malameid. Yesh misheina baal poil. There's certain malamdim that they're not baal poil. And the chiddush is afshu beilui besikla yesa mea baal poil. Even though it could be that he's a much bigger lamdan and a much bigger yodea in yonim than the baal poil. So if he can design, well, the more you know, the better you're able to teach. Whatever said that we know. The inyan for emes teaching and emes ashpor ela makalmim is not from the goydel hayidiyah. It's not from there. It's from the ability of what you do know, how to get that over in such a way that it will be miskabel eitala talmid. And therefore he said, even though there could be that the lamda is more of a ilui b'sichlo yeza me'abal poyo, or masig yoisa, and he's able to grasp and understand more in the whole noise of the limud. We call mochim zeh, meaning al malamed poyo ba'talmid, v'zeh ain't a poyo. And that lamdan, he's not poyo. Well, said the Rabbi, that's not understandable. Why should that be? Why should it be that the guy who doesn't know so much, he's Dr. Poyo, and the one who knows Azavil, certainly he's Mamish London, he's not Poyo. So that final answer is going to be, because there one he doesn't know so much, but he knows how to order all of his words and to literally to give what you might call feed, panosa, into his sentences in such a way that they come over in an order and a very understandable mishkabel way to lower makabel. And therefore, that's a gift miyuchad, which comes from kloya, it's not from the understanding. And somebody who works on that in the end, he becomes a malamed toiv, and he's the emes of malamed. Therefore you're talking the lotion of the chadorim, that you got a malamed ba'apoil, he's the one that they want, not necessarily the big lamdan who doesn't know how to somehow. So that's what we're now going to get involved in a few lines now, but there a discussion in that particular inyan. And therefore there begins with a kashiyah, the l'chera inyan alimut toli ba'asogeh. Everything's dependent. If you want to teach somebody and learn with him something, you've got to know. And the more you know, then the better off you are. Demishu bal seichel gadol yesa yochel lilmoid yesa. Somebody who's a bigger yochel lilamed, I'm sorry. He can teach more. I mean, if he knows more, then he can teach more. No, isn't it that way? And therefore the Rebbe says, look at learning in its own seder of learning. Nowadays, the kids are, how to call it, 6 years old, they're learning Chumash. Another year, they're going to learn Mishnayos. Another year, they're going to learn... In other words, that each time you go up in Seichel, you've got to have a bigger Baal Seichel. Somebody who only knows Chumash, he can't teach them Hashkolas Gemara, because he's into Chumash, and he's not into Gemara. And as they write them in the whole Indian, so we see that it is totally in what you know. So there are in each slav where you get... let's say you get into Gemara, then there's different people in Gemara. So he said the one who knows how to give it over, he's the one who's matzliach. Emes, it's totally in seichel. But the etzem giving over to the makabel is not totally in the seichel. It's only the classification of the limud that is totally in the seichel. And that's what the Rebbe, if you look further in the lines, you'll see of it. A maskana is that he who knows how to listen to the kloy yesh yoyates, he is the one that gives over to the Talmidim. But even Haki Dorush. So we only ask ourselves the Shaila, why is it Dafka that the Kloy is Hayoyates? What you do is, what's up Dafka the Kloyas? Why should they be the ones that give all the eitzes and the lave has to understand? And certain people say that lave in the Gemara is also called the Moya. Because Mavin is Shaila also to the Moya. And where judge the dafki the infant the kidneys, they are what begin, and they're the source of the whole power to eventually be able to give over to the makabel. So first of all, I can see that I'm not so sure that the question is already bothering anybody particularly. And Titans is everybody's saying, listen, it's getting late, we're going to do tomorrow. When's this guy going to realize he's going to call it a night? So there might be one girl into the whole child. Well, suffice it to say that the Nakuda is that who is it in your whole group that really splits up things in such a way that something which is not really desirable begins to go out in a way that it won't interfere, and things which are really desirable are going to be fed into the system one way or another in a practical way. Who is it that does that in the body? The kidney. The kidneys are those organs that they really differentiate ultimately what is desirable and what has to be rid, and how's it going to affect the person. That koyach is an amazing koyach, and that koyach doesn't exist not in the life mitzadat, and I feel in the moyach can differentiate between svaras. Mamish poil sein in the life of a mensch, poil havdil bein a rotzoi bein a einer rotzoi begashmis kipshuri. Well, that's the koyach. And that's what the Gemara means to it in Brachas. And the Gemara means there's a good, there's one of the prompts good. That means that the klois, one part of the klois is pushing into the good part of the system, into everything you're going to absorb. And there's another one that's busy with pushing the inyonim out, which are not so valuable. Therefore, you've got to be careful not to listen in the wrong. B'zeh yuvan habe dvarim. If you look in Geras HaKodesh from the Malton Rebbe over there in Tanya in Perek Tesvav, you see the Alter Rebbe is didactic in the Goydel Union of the Klois, and they are the Koyach when they tell her what really get things done in a puyo, so we see that not Chilos of Pesach and Oidopar, that everything really, the ability to really differentiate is dafki in the koyach hataktiv from the mensch, and dafki that's puyo. You don't know Chilos and Beseifan, ein kana machim, lahari b'zeh. Therefore, something is not so good with the kidneys of the mensch, and mamish that's puyo achalizes in the clawless organ they have always. People have things, faults in their kidneys, mamish. They're not able to function in a normal life.
And what's the shaykhus between Perish and the Gemara what's the shaykhus in the Perish and the Gemara that there are two kidneys, that one is good and one is bad, and Perish and Geras HaKodesh that one is netzach and one is...
One is netzach, what's that got to do with it? Well, you see, netzach is a from Mulchama with the Bilti Toiv, and Hoyd even more. Hoyd is like driving out the Bilti Toiv. As they state, what's down in the Rushim from the Rabbeim, that Hoyd is like a form of Gevura where you actually drive out the Bilti Ratzoi. You make war against the Bilti Ratzoi.
Did you press this before you?
That's even Hoyd. So